This second part of the day, after this wonderful lunch, you know what will follow. He's already standing here and he will work us through encryption. And that is a very important topic for all of us. But before he goes, before Hans-Peter take the floor, um, I would like to tell you something. Maybe we didn't emphasize this enough, but there is not such a thing as a free lunch. And actually, we have expectations from you. And that is that at the end of the day, you will have some of our team asking you how you intend to implement what you've heard here during those 2 days in your countries with your community. So we would love you actually to um, take some of what we discuss here and really start thinking on what it is that you feel would matter in your own communities when getting back home. And there will be a follow up. Trust me. Christine will be there. Nick will be there. They will chase you to just see and in a friendly way. But we would really like to make sure that we'll start a friendly way, and then you got reminder. Something's ringing at midnight. It's us. And yeah, and thanks to Karen, IoT stuff, we are in your house anyway. So more seriously, we will just try to follow up to just see how we can really help you doing this. So it's a little bit the purpose of what will happen at the end of those 2 days. With this in mind, I'm very happy to introduce you, Hans-Peter, because you will help us leading one of our critical, uh, not campaign, but project in ISOC, and this is about encryption. Up to you.
Okay, thank you, and hello to everybody after lunch. It's always a pleasure to be the first speaker after lunch to keep you all awake and living, and I'll do my best. And don't be intimidated by the words strong encryption or encryption. We will go as soft as possible and not be too hard on you. So before starting, I would like to uh, tell to everybody, please feel free to stop me. Please feel free to ask questions at any time. If I'm not able to answer your questions immediately, I'm trying to answer them later on via email. And you can reach me via email a little later. The address is at the end of the slides. And if I'm understanding correctly, the slides will be up for revisit after. So there is enough possibility to reach me if I'm too fast, not deep enough in some area, please speak. So let's go. But before we talk about encryption, I think we have to talk why we need encryption. And my main motivation about this is the word trust. Trust on the internet is so essential. We need it to be able to conduct what we are doing, all our business. But trust is not an easy thing. Trust is not something you can switch on or switch off, like your light bulb or your access to the internet. Trust is something which has multi-facets or which is multi-layered. So trust is a very shy creature. It takes a long time to build up trust, and it takes a short moment to lose all trust with a wrong move. So it's something which has to be cultivated very sensitive. Trust, in most cases, needs a long time to build up. It cannot be ordered and be there in a few days or even in a few years. Normally, it takes much longer. So we have to be careful not to destroy it in a very short time. And trust can be destroyed in very short moments. If you look at all the breaches of privacy or the breaches of things which have happened over the last 2 or 3 years, these are good examples why trust is such a quick moving and shy thing. Oops, it's not trusting my devices, but it works. So, trust. I give you an example why trust is essential for me. I'm today here in Bucharest. Sometimes I'm hard to remember where you are when you wake up in your hotel room. but today I managed to remember I'm in Bucharest. And I have to do a very urgent money transfer thing with my bank at home. Okay, should I go straight forward from my bedside to the desk and do it, or think a little bit before I do it? I would propose we think a little bit. Oops, and yes, we do. And where do I need trust in this? First thing, I will do it with my tablet. So I have to trust my tablet. Why do I do this? Because I'm using it and nothing had happened to me over the last half year. Years ago, I had my tablet on a cruise ship around in the area of Hawaii, and suddenly my tablet did some strange things, sending out emails I never have originated. So you have to clean it up. You have to be very careful with your device, what you are doing, and you have to be very careful before you trust it again and use it for banks. So what I have to look is only the software on it I want. Is there nothing inside which wants to grab my passwords or grab my email? I need them to shoot my money. So I have to look at this device first. So doing virus scanning using really well-known software and not downloading every app which is around helps you a little bit. And it has to be under my control all the time, just to be sure. But that's only the start of the trust chain. The next step is I have to trust this hotel network. Oh, how can I trust this hotel network? I arrived just yesterday evening. I don't know anybody from hotel staff. Shall I simply trust it? No way. And I trust this device? No. Never ever. I wouldn't trust this hotel network. So using again a firewall and some scanning software will help to protect my tablet against the hotel network, but won't help me to do my banking transactions. So I have to go further. I have to go out to the internet to I have to go out to the internet to reach my bank at home. And that's a very dangerous space, the internet. We have learned over time, it's not only friends out there are very bad people out there. So they are waiting for my data to come by and grab it. So what can I do? I use, and now the word encryption appears the first time. I use an encrypted VPN to call back home and attach to my office servers at home. I trust my home still trustworthy somehow. So I'm using only HTTPS secured ways to access any server, so nobody can listen in. But that's not enough. I have to talk to my bank. So the next level of trust is I have to use some special software checking the identity of this bank. And I do this by using certificates, which I receive when I go to my bank's server. I receive a certificate, and this certificate is checked against knowledge inside the software, which shows me that this is really my bank and nobody pretending to be my bank. But you have to trust the certificates. And we know from experience that even certificates can be broken and can be exchanged. So the next thing, when I do the transaction, I add some additional layer of security and want my bank to call me back on my mobile phone in a separate channel with some encrypted thing, encryption again. And only if this matches what's coming from the other server, then I believe, okay, I'm free to do this transaction. And finally, I have enough trust to do this single transaction. Sounds complicated. And we have the word encryption at least 5 or 6 times during this transaction. And these are all different ways of encryption, different usages of encryption, even different types of encryption. Yeah. And in the end, it's up to trusting my bank. And nobody, no encryption can help me with trusting my bank. If my banker runs away with my money, I'm doomed anyhow, whatever I do with encryption. So encryption is simply essential for the internet. The internet today is our natural way or our most central way to do most of our business, most of our public life, and a large part of our private life is nowadays depending on internet functionality. And to make this sure, we have to have some level of trust to the system. And we cannot trust to the system as a whole because the internet consists of many, many networks which are run by many companies. Many different people are working on it, and not everybody is reliable and not everybody is trustworthy. Though we build up additional levels of trust on top of it, and we are using encryption to do it. And encryption is our essential tool to make sure that at least part of our privacy is kept, uh, which is used to make sure that our transactions, when we are sending them over the internet, like giving money or so, are not changed. It would be fun to change some numbers in the account to move money somewhere else. And we want to make sure that we only talk with our bank and not a different one. And sometimes it's very handy to make sure that something which you have received is really coming from a defined source. So he cannot deny, he cannot say, no, I didn't send this to you. It helps a lot if you can identify somebody exactly. And for all this, encryption is a tool you want to use. So, what kinds of encryption do we have and do we see on the internet? And now it gets a little bit more technical. Uh, we have encryption of content. So we do something with the message we are sending or the transaction we are sending to somebody else. So nobody on transit can read it. That's one of the key or one of the essential functions of encryption. Do it end to end, do it safely, and do it in a way nobody in between can capture it and read it. Uh, there are some methods of encryption which are doing this not end to end. Perhaps you have heard about this end to end principle in the internet. That always means one communication party and the other communication party on the end of the connection are more or less directly connected, and in this case, protected by encryption. You can do encryption in a way that it might be broken in between. It looks for you absolutely encrypted. It looks for the other end also absolutely encrypted, but in the middle, it's opened up and it's read by somebody. That might be a party which is allowed to do this. Many companies are using this kind of devices. Every bank in Germany, at least, or in Europe, I should say, is obliged to do similar things because they are obliged by law, by the Basel regulation, that they keep records of all transactions between you as a customer and your bank account. So they have to open up this communication somehow, technically, otherwise they wouldn't comply with law. And that's not a bad, well, you could think it's a bad thing, but it's at least not a forbidden thing. It's a thing which is provided by law. If somebody else is doing this, oh, I don't feel so. Companies are doing this a lot of the time just to make sure that nobody is leaking information who is not authorized to leak this information. So, yeah, you have to look very closely at your encryption if it's really end to end. The other type of encryption which we often use is cryptographic signatures, which is a different thing from the one we have seen before. We don't encrypt the data flow, we only sign the data, and we only provide a proof of the sending part, of the sender, who he is. This does a little bit more. It does also allow you to have a checksum on your text. to make sure nobody has changed anything in this text on the way. If you add a timestamp, you can also put this in an archive and years later prove this person has done or has sent this text in this form and it was archived on this date and it's provable by the cryptographic signature. Nobody has changed anything in this archive. Many uses for it, not so many bad ideas, but breaking such a cryptographic signature would also open up many possibilities of bad ideas or bad things. So, yeah, again, to recap a little bit the types of encryption we see. The most common types of encryption are these three types. One is the symmetric keys. Symmetric key means both parties have the same key. One party is using this key to encrypt things. The other party is using exactly the same key to decrypt things. Easy to understand, straightforward. Come to some problems a little later. A little bit more complicated is asymmetric keying, where you have one key to close the lock and a different key which opens the lock on the other side. That's a little bit different from your normal room key because normally you use the same key for closing, for opening, but here you have two keys. That has also some pros and cons we will detail a little bit later. One of the things with asymmetrical keying is it works this way, but it works also the other way. You could use the green key first to encrypt something, and then you can use only the red key to decrypt it. Different usages a little bit later. The one-time hash is simply using an algorithm which is nearly or is very similar to the ones above to create a one-time keyword which proves that the text has not been modified since doing this. That's for securing things you are storing or you're transporting. Symmetrical encryption. As said, both parties use the same key, but there's a big problem. Before you can use your symmetric keying, you have to bring your key to the other side. So in most cases, symmetrical encryption works perfectly in closed groups, in small groups where you can exchange keys before. If one of them loses a key, the whole thing is broken. So it's handling of the keys, which is really essential for a successful usage. The good side of symmetrical keying is it's very fast. So it's used everywhere where you, for example, want to encrypt data on a line, data on transport. And it's considered highly secure. Oh, funny. It's considered highly secure. What does it mean? Just a little sidetrack. In cryptography, all the algorithms are rather complicated, taking a lot of math in C3. So none of these concepts are really provable in the end. They are not really absolutely sure that it's secure. Many people who know a lot about mathematics, many about cryptography, looked at those methods and declared them secure. But they are not absolutely unbreakable. We are talking about breaking security a little bit later. So they are considered highly secure. This changes over time. For example, some things are broken over the last 30 or 40 years in cryptography. Some things are easier to break because computers are becoming faster and faster. So often enough you see the wording, we consider this strength of a key as secure enough for now and the next 3 or 5 years. And that's true for most of the cryptography. It's a glimpse in the time, and it may change over time. Well, what else can we say about symmetrical encryptions? 2 examples, DES and the advanced encryption systems are 2 used in many of the internet protocols like IP security, SSH, secure shell, or TLS are using those symmetrical encryption schemes in different variations and different schemes. Oops. And I give you an example how this is working, and don't try to understand it. I would guess nobody in this room really has ever gone through all the details of such an encryption scheme. Even if you try, it's nice that it's old-fashioned. It's the first version of DES that has been changed over time. It shows you a lot of logic which is going on here, which is moving bits around with keys and data and moving it again and moving it again and moving again. And that makes the things so distorted, then you can transmit over the line. And there are enhancements of DES over time because somebody found out you can crack this. So triple DES was invented, which does nothing but to take this block, add it a second time and a third time. So put the data 3 times to this machine to make it more encrypted and harder to decrypt. So that is one of the advances. AES is working a little bit different and others are even more complicated. I don't go deeper, otherwise we can go for 3 days on some specific mathematics. I want to spare you. Let's go to asymmetrical encryption. Normally, this is done with 2 different keys, but these 2 keys have to be mathematically as connected that the whole thing can work. And that's not easy. That's very tricky math and was invented by some people after some trying and longer time. And yeah, everything encrypted by the first key can be decrypted by the second key. So use a private confidential first key to encrypt your data and sign it at the same time. Then you send it to the other side. Use a public second key to decrypt it and check the signature and check the integrity if you like. And that's the difference to our symmetrical paths. In the symmetrical paths, both keys must be confidential and must be kept to the talking parties or the receiving parties. In this case, you can give one key as a public key to the outside, to everybody. And it still works because only things encrypted with a private key you keep with you can be decrypted by the public key. Nobody else can encrypt something in a way that this public key will fit to. So that's absolute. That's a considered safely, as we said before, that nobody else can do it, and it can be a proof that you did send it and nobody else. You can inverse this process and use a public second key to encrypt something. And then you can be sure that only the intended recipient, who has still his private key, can decrypt it. Just some imagination about email. Think about email. You want to send an email to somebody and the receiving end should be sure that you send it and nobody else sent it and nobody has changed it. Use your private key to encrypt it, send it out, put your public key on your website or on your business card or wherever, and everybody can use it and decrypt it. And if somebody wants to send something confidentially to you, he simply uses the public key, encrypts the email with the public key, then you can send this email to everybody in the world and nobody can read it but the single guy who has this private key. To make things a little bit more secure, you can store your private key on devices like this, which you plug into your USB port, and only somebody with a small key in his hand, perhaps not a PIN number attached to it, is able to read this email. But be warned, don't lose that key. Otherwise, you can't read your emails. Even the emails in your archive, if they are still encrypted, there is no way to regain this key back to you, and you can't read your emails. And be sure you are using an email system which is able to keep your keys over time. It's fun if you have keys which expire every year, so you have to add a key every year, and you find out after the 5th year you are doing this, that your email system can hold only 5 years, and suddenly you can't read any email which is older than 5 years anymore, because your old keys are simply thrown out of your email system. Happened to me sometimes, so I have to use a second email system for this other key. So, yes, and this is one glimpse to the future. Security is not for free. As you said before, there's no such a thing like free lunch. There's no such a thing like free security. Security needs your implication you need to do. Asymmetrical encryption is another drawback. It's rather slow, and it uses a lot of computation power on your machine. So you shouldn't use it to on a continuous stream of data. You should use it only on emails and things. There are some names: Rivas, Shamia, Alderman. So are the 3 people who invented one of the first still as secure considered methods to do this. There are in meantime are different other methods to do it, and they are used in different protocols. All of them you can find in some of the internet protocols somewhere. Most of them are used today in SSL or TLS, so in your HTTPS secured access to servers. As soon as you do this, you are using asymmetrical encryption to get your first connection to the server. The server sends you a certificate, and this is later used for the rest. It's used in email, it's used in DNSSEC and all the other areas of implementation. And just a quick jump back to this morning session. Most of the protocols I'm mentioning here, especially TLS, allows you for having 5, 10, 15 different ways of encryption, just to be sure that if a single one is broken, you have alternatives and you can change immediately to something else. So not concentrating on one single solution, but having several solutions makes things more safe and makes things more reliable for future use and for against future attacks. Base of asymmetrical encryption, RSA, it's a multiplication of large prime numbers. Okay, multiplication, everybody had at school, 3 times 5 is 15. It's easy to do. But doing the same thing with the usual size of these numbers, where you are using numbers with 100 digits or 120 digits, it's not so easy anymore, but multiplication is still doable. Even everybody in this room with a little bit of concentration could do this kind of multiplication. The next step in RSA is you have to find prime numbers. Go back to school time. Prime numbers are these crazy numbers which are not dividable by anything but by themselves and the number 1. And the critical thing in RSA is finding a huge number. No, it's defining 2 prime numbers, multiplies them, and really get a really huge number. And this is publicly available. And to crack the system, you have to find the 2 prime factors in this huge number. And it's considered still not technically possible to do this in an amount of time which is reasonable. If you take the internet and all computers and the internet to crack one single RSA signature, it would be doable. Some people say it would take a year, others say it would take only 6 months, but okay, that's not achievable by nobody for now, perhaps later. Sorry? Oh, yeah. Okay, that's later. And even if this is broken, okay, we switch to the next algorithm. This is elliptic curves, which is by the intersection of 2 elliptic curves. He said we should work for the newer ones, and that's true.
Yeah,
We
this,
should really use.
RSA did very nice job, but it has been a while. So the humanity should look for the others. As I mentioned. Yeah, of course, it will take time. So it takes time.
Has been very well reviewed by mathematicians.
Of course, but I also in my MSc thesis I worked on prime numbers and randomization. So it has a pattern. It is not proved yet, but prime numbers are very interesting topic, but they have a pattern, and with the quantum computers, the speeds are incredible. So with these speeds,
Yes,
everything is possible.
yes, and we definitely should look for newer algorithms. We shouldn't stand down and immediately drop RSA in a panic. It's still usable, but we should start to move to newer things and start to grow. Uh, for everybody who wants to look at this a little bit closer, this is the algorithm behind RSA. Don't try to do it at home. It's fun. It's mathematics. It takes a while. And that is how it's implemented. You do a lot of large divisions and a lot of large factoring. And that is something which is nowadays often done in specialized hardware. And that's one of the problems. RSA is really put into hardware in many devices out on the internet, which will be a little bit hard to replace immediately. So it takes a while. But we should start. Absolutely right. Back to usage of encryption. What does it help? It helps to keep our privacy. It keeps things secret on transit. We can encrypt web access with HTTPS. We can use SSL for email transport. We can use encryption for messenger protocols. It's usable nearly everywhere. We can also use it to keep data in storage secret. We tend today to move data in cloud storages and believe that our cloud providers are safe against attacks and are safe against being bribed by somebody to sell our data. Okay, simply encrypt it and you are free. There are plugins for even the user space things like box.com or Dropbox. You can encrypt your things before you put them on those parts and be sure that nobody can tamper with it and do something. Keep your backups secret. There was some smaller problem with Apple backups some time ago where things are leaked because they were simply not encrypted. And that shouldn't happen to you, especially if those backups from your devices are done in background and automatically. And after a year, you have forgotten that you have implemented this application and it's still uploading every day or every week all your private data to some cloud provider, which has gone bankrupt and is now in the hands of whoever. So be careful what you are doing. You ask for it. The principle for HTTPS, it's a combination. And HTTPS or SSL, I'm taking just as an example because it's used so often. It's an example of a mix. You first do the first step is you get your certificates forth and back, and using asymmetric encryption to check this and generate this. And from the results of this, you first have either your green bar or red bar or your closed padlock or open padlock or whatever as an indication how safe it's considered to connect to the server. And at the same time, it allows the system to create a symmetrical key and transports this key via the asymmetrical key in a safe and secure way. And that is used for the rest of the session. So you don't rely on the slow and costly asymmetric encryption for the rest of your session. And this key is thrown away after the session is terminated and a new one is created for your next session. So it's a very dynamic and still considered highly secure thing for the moment. And we discussed this morning about the influence of big parties in standardization. This HTTPS principle is nearly the same for TLS, for the transport layer security, which is used when it's not a visible web thing, but something else transporting data. And there's a new version of it given out by the ITF just a few months ago. And it was built in a way that it's not possible to tamper anyway in the immediate step with this public and private certificates in the first round. So you know exactly that your partner is your bank or your travel agency you're talking about. But there was a strong wish of companies to have this breakable somehow. It's a wish of law enforcement, quite natural, but it was also a wish of the big companies, and it was brought to the ITF. And I think that's a good example how ITF standardization could resist to big companies, because they simply said, or not simply, they said no for 1.5 years, no and no and no again, and no and no and no. And at the end, the standard came without the possibility to break this. But there was an easy solution for the big companies. They went to ETSI, the European Telecommunication Standardization, whatever. European, they are making GSM standards, they are making LTE standards and similar things, and went to them and said, oh, could we have a version of TLS which is breakable without that the customer sees it? And ETSI said, yes, we do. Brought out a standard, called it TLS-E for ETSI TLS version of it, and this is breakable without any notion to the customer. ITF threatens them a little bit, so it has to change the name, so it's more clearly different, but it's still out. It will be implemented, it will be used, and suddenly we have 2 versions of TLS, one which is very secure, highly safe, and functioning perfectly, and one is, which is also secure, which is also working perfectly, but allows somebody in the middle to break it and look at the data strings. So that's how big boys are playing on this field. Usage of encryption, we can prove who we are by signing an email. So by checking web certificates, we can prove, we can check this by using additional 2-factor authorization, like with my banks, they're sending something on a different channel. And for example, if I'm running the banking application on my mobile, say, don't send to the same mobile the certification. I have to use a second device somehow. I have 2 mobiles, or a tablet and a mobile, or a computer and a mobile. Just if I lose one of them, I don't lose anything. But again, security has a price and we have to pay. Usage of encryption. I give you a bad example of encryption and a bad example of usage of this thing. It's a German trusted email initiative. It's something which got a lot of press coverage, and it came up shortly after the revelations about all the leakages and all the NSA things about listening into email. The German email providers, or the main German email providers, came up with a promise, okay, we will do it in a very secure way. All the communication between our email servers from now on will be secured via TLS, and we will check certificates against others from a small database. We set up a database, and everybody in our small club of starting 5, later on it was a few more, will have its keys in this database, and we can absolutely safely check that it's okay. Hey, looking good, great. Some progress on encryption, some progress on security. Everybody should be happy. But then the real implementation leaked out, and our friends from the Chaos Computer Club, which are always looking for those things, came immediately up with a press release. Hey, but the email is stored in each of those servers unencrypted. because you encrypt only the transport path between the servers and nothing else. Oh, yes. Okay. Don't you think that's bad? Why? Yeah, you are storing this data in clear. Yeah, we thought it would be better not to have it encrypted all the time because we might be forced by law enforcement to give out the email of somebody who has done some criminal offenses. That was some interview on it. So we now have an email system in Germany, which is considered highly trusted and highly secure from some parties, but in reality, it's just a fake screen and it's just not sure. It's just as bad as before. But okay, they are happy with it and many of the customers are believing. A good examples, I find some Swiss companies doing emails and all of them are doing email in a real secure and safe way. That's, for example, a picture from the Proton system. The email will be encrypted on the sending side and not decrypted ever before the receiver does it. So that's a secure way to do it. And that's a way we should advocate how it's done correctly. But okay, it has an additional effort because if you're sending email to somebody you don't know before, you have to get your keys transported. So they have good systems to do it, but it's still an additional step you are going to. So let's go away a little bit from technical parts. We should always think against, are we protecting ourselves? Because depending on what you are protecting against, you have to use different methods. So the first and easiest thing is a casual bystander, the casual network admin or server admin who is simply interested in what you are doing and looking into your files. That's easy. That can be done very fast. You can protect you against bad guys spying on you. Might be even a friendly company who is spying on you, just wanting to know what you are selling or wanting to know how often in the night you are going somewhere or what's going on in your room, everything. You have to protect yourself against guys who are pretending to be somebody else, especially pretending to your bank, to your eBay account, and trying to trick you into doing things which are not good. And some people need to protect themselves against the government. Okay, some need to protect against police. I'm not sure if it's still in our realm to help them or that's okay what they are doing. And some people are simply protecting against other parties who are interested what they are doing in their country. So it depends a lot on your origin and on your environment. And you should think exactly how much effort do you put into your security because you are protecting against one of those levels and think a little bit more about it. So let's talk about breaking encryption, the other side. Is encryption really safe? And I would say attacks against our goal to secure encryption as a trustworthy thing are coming from many, many sides. I have heard already some here. One of the most used things is still simply find out the passwords of the other part by go into a large office space, just look below all the keyboards and you have half the passwords you need to break into the rest of the company. And similar things using simple passwords. Science, that's the one which was mentioned before. There might be a sudden breakthrough in mathematical science and an encryption scheme is completely broken suddenly because you find a way to reduce the number of primes or something similar. Buying exploits, that's also part of the thing. If you want to break your encryption, buy an exploit, buy something, a knowledge that something is badly implemented so you can use it and use it for your own purpose. Yep, sure. I will repeat it.
I think I always tell it when I also give my students. I don't know, you probably watched Enigma film, right? So in that film, they were trying to break the code, but some of the people cannot understand breaking encryption like break the encryption. No, it's not. So the cryptanalysts, the people who are trying to break the code, are trying to least the time that will find the password to open it. So sometimes, for example, we call it brute force, trying all passwords. It takes, say that it takes 1 month. If you can change it to 1 day, so it's breaking. Is it? So what we are trying to do is trying to shorten the time that will be used to
absolutely right.
the
Breaking doesn't mean immediate snap off or immediate one off. It makes it easier to do the rest of the analytics. It makes it easier to go through.
Yeah.
And that might happen.
In that film also, they were trying to find some patterns that will help the decryption easier. So sometimes the breaking the encryption involves social analysis. If you find the person's girlfriend's birthday or some other patterns, so you can use it for decryption. Okay,
yes, the big breach which was going through the press last, I think it was December, about German governmental people who are exposed to whatever, was done exactly this way by looking into public social pages for the names of the daughter, for the birthday of the dog, or whatever, and finding this guy. It was a young guy who simply used this publicly available information to crack passwords of more than half of our parliament. So that tells you something about the weakness of the passwords used by governmental people, and it tells you something about the possibilities of social engineering. Okay, but the other part of it, if you weaken it a little bit, the other threat is just in computing power. Computers get faster and faster and faster. And for some time, it was enough in RSA to simply increase the length of the keys. 15 years ago, a 512-bit key was secure enough. Today, I'm using an 8,000-bit long key to feel secure enough. Wiretapping helps you just to read things. Replay attacks are possible just to record something and play it over and over. You can forge certificates by breaking into a higher layer of certificates. And I have to bring up this word because it's a buzzword and appears everywhere. Quantum computing is always taken as the absolute threat because it would do anything at the same time. Okay, this threat has been around for 8 or 10 years now. I don't believe it will be an immediate threat. And by the way, if the bad guys could use quantum computing, why couldn't we use also quantum computing to make things more secure? So it's a race of arms, which is same on both sides. Breaking encryption by brute force. My example is this cool old machine invented sometime between World War I and World War II by a German, used by the German army, and which was considered as unbreakable by analytics work at the time of World War II. What did the people, that's internal of it, that's how it's working. It's changing letters, exchanging letters with other letters, step by step by typing in something on this keyboard below, and small bulbs, light bulbs were lighting up with an encrypted letter on the other side. And what did the good people do in England? They did massive parallel computing. They got a smuggled out interior of this engine on the left, which is a drum-like thing with several layers on it. And it was smuggled out by a Polish guy, by the way, so international working on this. And it was brought back to UK and kept in the UK for a long time and later on given to the United States. And they simply used not one machine, but they used several hundreds of them in parallel to encrypt the same text. And then there was an implementation error. The German guys who are using this thing always send the date as a first thing in their message. And they send it not once, they send it twice. Old radio operators' habits. So it was always sure that the first 6 or 8 characters had to be the same 6 or 8 characters on the second. So you could run these massive parallel machines, test one key after the other, and as soon as the first 6 were the same as the second 6, you could believe you have the result. And as you said, it's only halfway, then because it's more possibilities. So you print out the text and have a manual operator to look at it. And if the rest of the text is also readable, you have practice. If not, you do it again. And they managed with this mechanical instruments to crack the keys of these other machines, normally in the end of the war between half an hour and 3/4 of an hour. Okay, so everything which is invented, there might be something against it. So let's talk about another. Breaking encryption is one thing. Breaking encryption was believed for a long time, for example, by the NSA. They built huge computer centers just to do nothing as pictured before by massive repeatance of keys and testing of keys to break them. The other thing, which is a little bit more used by European politics at the moment, is weakening encryption. We could make encryption a little bit weaker, then we are faster in decrypting things if it's needed. And my fixed belief is that's a total failure. It's absolutely wrong to think this way. There is several methods to weaken encryption. One is to require that a master key has been given to some authority. Key is code. You have to put your keys on it. And that's nonsense. That's never been functioning because there will be some leakage. In the end, it will not be one key. It will be several copies of this key because several people must be able to decrypt. So it will come out. That won't work. Next thing is, master key is not every key is put to somebody, but there's a master key. Won't work. It will be legal. Invisible break of keychain, I talked about it a little bit earlier, can misused by an attacker and will be misused. It will be leaked out. Smaller keys, so I think that was sometime tried to do keys larger than so many bits are not allowed for private users. At least in some countries, this was done by law. Doesn't work. Doesn't absolutely work. You can't restrict this to smaller and simpler things. The result is simply don't do it. And it's very hard to bring this message to some of the authorities. It doesn't work very well. And the result is, if you discuss with governments, they simply don't take this. So they simply believe we can do something. If you don't allow us to weaken encryption, please let us circumvent encryption. So we need somebody in between who spies. Sorry for the German in this type. I will quickly translate. German government allows now officially the usage, or allows by law, by changed law, the usage of Trojan horse software. It might be bought or it might be self-developed by the agency for law enforcement in several classes of cases and areas. So sorry, we found out we cannot forbid encryption. Sorry, we cannot weaken encryption enough. So let's circumvent encryption by giving law enforcement the authority to put something on your device which records everything, records your keystrokes, records your voice, records whatever you're doing, and sends it back to some server before it's encrypted. Okay. We have to live with it. Germany has a special office, which is a special, it's paid by government. It's created 2 years ago. It's called Office for Information Technique in the Security Area. And it was created to weaken encryption, to find methods to break encryption or weaken encryption. They had a big problem to find anybody who wants to work there, because from the first description, it was quite clear you will never have success. You can't break this kind of encryption. You can't weaken it really in a good way. So they changed it a little bit, and now they can buy and test and implement everything which finds vulnerabilities in software to circumvent encryption. This is officially done and paid by the German government. But at the same time, there's another office also paid by German government, also officially. It's our Amt for Security in the Information Technology. And they had a press release just 2 days ago. I give you the English version again. It is for sure that strong and correct implemented cryptography protects efficiently all the confidentiality of all digital communication. Yes, I think the same way. The makers of code have succeeded in the race against the code breakers. Therefore, the ubiquitous usage of secure cryptography should become normal for all application areas in Germany. Okay, this press release goes a long way longer and especially details what official agency should use and which kind of cryptography and that. So we have a government who says yes and no at the same time. Give you some more examples. What's happening in your home? We are discussing smart cities a while ago, and I was analyzing smart metering, things you have in your home and which are sending out information on either the internet or any other line about your usage of power in your home. This is my coffee maker. This is my printer firing up and printing some pages. This is ironing of something in my home. You don't need any decryption. You see simply by the patterns what's going on. So encryption is nice, but it's not all. It's not helping everything. Sorry? 3 pots of tea. Yeah, one for me, one for my wife, and one for later. No, and you can do some pattern matching. Okay, it's not easy, but it's possible. Have fun. But there's also leaking of information by design. Anybody seen any of those devices? No, never, ever. Anybody has left anything of this? Might it be Google's Echo or whatever in your home? They are doing funny things. For example, they're storing everything you have set, every command for years. If you don't delete it manually, you can go back and look what you have done before. Okay, that's one thing which has to do with policy. And again, I did some analytics, what's going on, and you have to do a little bit more to be concrete. You see this, that's the activation command. That's a short command to one of those devices, which is nothing that play some music. And then you see the music is played. Only by seeing the traffic patterns without seeing any content, you can decide if somebody is at home or if somebody is doing something. And many of the things are even recognizable what's going on. Is he opening his garage door or whatever? So encryption helps, but it's not the solution for everything. So we still have to do more things. Yeah, that was my quick ride, roller coaster ride through encryption. It shouldn't answer all the questions. It couldn't answer all the questions. It should leave open. And I hope it left you with some feeling that encryption is something essential, but it's not completely filling everything. We could do now a short question and answer session. If something is open, I would propose doing it now before we go into some of the group sessions I've prepared. Wait. Overrun. There's a mic.
Well, let's start at the beginning of trust. You started. I just wanted to ask if you agree. Can you really trust any software that isn't fully open source? If you don't know the code, then can you really trust it? If there's something malicious?
Sorry, definitely not. Because there were already major flaws in open source software. The OpenSSL stack is one of them, which has an implementation error, which was not seen by anybody looking at it. One thing. The other thing, I was part in some code inspections over time over the last 30 or 40 years. And I admit fully, reading code line by line and trying to understand what somebody else has done is simply not possible.
Yeah, it is difficult.
You can get a glimpse of it. You can see something which is obvious, but if you really try to hide things, you have no chance.
Yeah, but if it's closed source, it's worse. It's a lot harder.
Closed source is a little bit worse.
A lot. Well,
it depends on the number of
We don't
people
know
you
what it
trust.
does, right? It's a black box.
It's a black box. It has some more risks, but I would not consider it so catastrophically bad to absolutely not use it. Open source has its merits, absolutely yes, but it doesn't solve all the problems.
yeah, it doesn't. So yeah, it's not perfect, but I just saw it as if it's closed source, then it's completely like you can't trust it.
If you go down to cryptography and the higher levels of cryptography, I have a problem that I couldn't name more than a handful of people who even are able to understand the principles behind it, not talking about the coding of it. Yeah. And if two of them work for, let's call it Microsoft, then I would trust the closed software there more than open software, which has not been seen by any of this group.
Yeah, but the trust is like you have two things. It's trust in somebody's intentions and trust in their capability.
Yeah.
Yeah. When there's closed source, then you have to trust the intentions as well. But if it's open source, then it's a lot more trustworthy with what their intentions are, or at least you can see the code and see, you know.
I never managed to have more trust in open source. I have a little more trust in the ability to check what open source is doing. But that's simply over. Okay, but that might be very detailed.
Okay.
For open source, can I ask something?
No.
Okay.
It's a follow-up.
Yeah, it's about it. And I always think that open source can be made secure, but in closed source, we don't have the ability to do that. But open source doesn't mean it's secure, or it doesn't mean it's privacy. So the OpenSSL thing is just should be an awakening for the Linux community, because it's evident that we don't know how to test the code. We don't know how to write the code securely. So it's really an amazing. But that doesn't work every time, right? So it's yeah. But for example, there are some situations that, for example, that there is a security problem, and it happened before the holidays, and all the Microsoft people are out, so the patch couldn't be implemented. So everything has its own problem, I guess.
Yes, I fully would agree. I wouldn't agree with
Exactly.
some of the details, but overall, it helps a lot. In the background.
Yeah, it's more a philosophical question. Do you think the whole trust question on the internet can be solved by technology alone?
Definitely not. No, it must be more the habit how we are using the internet. It must be education about what's going on in the internet. It must be understanding that there is nothing like a completely trustworthy mechanism called the internet, ordered by government or ordered by technologists or ordered by companies or provided by open source. None of this would work completely.
Thank you.
I got the candid question of the day because I'm a PGP user, right? And some people declare that PGP was dead. But it's not my question. My candid yet technical question is, when there is flows or breach or something in my PGP relationship with someone, do I know about it or do I learn it later, or how does it work?
Sorry, if somebody breaches in, no, you don't see it. You don't see it. You would only recognize it by having a channel back to you telling you, oh, I couldn't believe you have sent this to me. Was it really you? Yeah. Then it could be found out. So there is no automatic way to find out breaches in this area. Okay. Yeah.
Look, first, I'm sorry, I need to do that because, well, with Hans Peter, what I love is that everything becomes clear. What I don't like is that we don't have time anymore to do the second part, which is a shame. I would love to drive this. Maybe you have a proposal. I have to. Let's negotiate. What do you believe? Exactly. And so we are aligned. So no, honestly, the fact is, wow, and we have a fantastic crowd with you, actually, the feedback that we received. What I would suggest, first, the homework from suggestion from Hans Peter is great. If you can share the question that you have and let those people here think about it. And what I would suggest, Nick, is that we organize a call with you and others that you feel should join the conversation on encryption. So if you could be part of this call in the next coming weeks, let's see how it works for you. I would like to dedicate a call on those questions that we were willing to ask you, or something like this, because I would love to continue. It's really critically important. The fact is, as I told you, we have a packed agenda. The next speaker has something to share as well. That would be Geran about IoT. And in between that and the next speaker, there is a coffee break. And I know that you love coffee break as well. So, Hans Peter, if you agree, if we can just resume now, I give it back.
Do it very quickly because standing between you as a crowd and the coffee break is a little bit dangerous. Though, first thing, we can continue this discussion on email or any other means anytime. That's fine for me. I'll just give you a quick walk through the workshop proposals or the ideas, and you can think about it a little bit and try to answer. For me, the main question I wanted to bring back a little bit is think back in your own country. What is the environment for things like lawful interception, for breakage of communication, for weakening of encryption? Is there a movement in government, in laws, which goes in this direction that already? Is it visible or is it not visible? Try to describe or get a feeling what your government thinks about encryption. Is it already a known problem to them or not? That would be nice to have a little bit feedback. And I was already fearing having this broadcasted directly could bring some of us in a little bit of conflict. Now it's much easier if it's done offline and coming back. And that is more thinking for you in your chapters and your home. Bring back some arguments for strong encryption. Can you list some good arguments for it? Can you prepare some parts of the discussion in this area? And at the same time, can you think of arguments against strong encryption? It's always good to know your enemy. So to prepare these arguments against before helps. Yeah, and that was a question which is more from Frederick and the others. What can a chapter do to enhance the usage of encryption in your country? Okay, easy thing. Is your web page is your web page using only HTTPS already today? Is it using only newer encryption algorithms today, or what else? Do you provide your members with a way of secure communication with either an encrypted communication path or encrypted email or something like that? Think about it a little bit. Yeah, then that's a usual education question. Yeah, and that's it. Okay. Think about it, and we will come back to you in this call, I believe. Everybody could think a little bit about those questions, and we will concentrate. And I'm happy to answer questions during the coffee break.